We begin our headlines this morning by confronting a disturbing reality, one that has haunted our streets, silenced our young people, and stained our democracy. From the Lekki toll gate in 2020 to the deadly crackdowns in the southeast in 2025, the brutality of Nigeria's security forces has not only persisted, but appears to have escalated. According to SBM intelligence, a total of 598 cases of hospitality incidents were recorded, with a total number of 824 fatalities in Nigeria between 2020 and 2025, many of which occurred at the hands of state and non-state actors. But the line between the two is increasingly blurred, and today we ask, who protects the people when the protectors become predators? Joining us for today's discussion to give us a breakdown of this report and its findings is security analyst with SBM Intelligence, Kehinde Giwa. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Olive. Thank you for having me.
Kehinde, we're seeing these numbers. We're seeing here a total of 598 cases of forced brutality recorded, with a total number of 824 fatalities in Nigeria between 2020 and 2025. Can you walk us through how we came about these numbers?
Yeah, thank you for having me once again, Olive, and good morning, everyone in the studio. It is imperative to note that forced brutality took, a major spike even after the 2020 NSAS that, shook the nation and triggered, nationwide reactions and even continental reactions. And you expect that all of the judicial panel of inquiry set across all states would help to, reform the system, reform police brutality, or completely terminate police brutality. But all of that has not happened. We've had, just like you said, we've had close to 900 fatalities in the last 5 years, spread across all states in Nigeria. So it is not, restricted to a certain state, and it is not also restricted to a certain perpetrator, so to speak, like the Nigerian police. It is cut across, all security agents. And it is imperative to put, there is a slight difference between extrajudicial killings and police brutality or forced brutality. Forced brutality happens when, security agents, violently, extort, brutalize, beat, harass, inflict, damages on unarmed and defenseless citizens. Why extrajudicial killings occur when security agents kill unarmed and defenseless civilians without going through the legal process. So you cannot have an extrajudicial killing without having a forced brutality, but not all forced brutality, will lead to an extrajudicial killing. So I'll just quickly run through the numbers and, what is responsible for these numbers across all of the states in Nigeria. It is imperative to state that Lagos is the epicenter for frequency in terms of forced brutality in Nigeria, and it is not restricted to the Nigerian police. Of course, the Nigerian police is chief amongst, all of the perpetrators, like, the LASMA, the NDLEA, the Nigerian Army, the KAI, King Against Indiscipline. We have vigilantes in the northeast and the northwest. So Lagos is chief, with a very high incident to a high fatality ratio. Lagos has had over 300 incidents of forced brutality in the last 5 years. They've also had over 300 fatalities, of forced brutality in the last 5 years. So you know that every time there is an incident, there is definitely going to be a fatality. That indicates that there is high lethality and there's high brutality in Lagos. Of course, the dense population of Lagos, the commercial activities in Lagos has a lot of roadblocks, Lagos has a lot of protests, Lagos has a lot of road patrols. This indicates that there will be frequent and consistent interactions between civilians and security agents. Like I said, it is not restricted to the police, even though the police have had more incidents and fatalities in the last 5 years. Of course, we go to Abuja. Abuja has more incidents, but less fatality, because Abuja is the seat of government. Security agents in Abuja are always very cautious, in inflicting damage, in inflicting brutality upon civilians, because a lot of protests happen in Abuja. The IMM protests happen in Abuja. The Senator Natasha case also happened in Abuja. And it is also pertinent to mention Delta. Before I came upon the show, you guys were discussing about Delta and how they are trying to crack down in decent dressing. Delta is the most fatal state in Nigeria in terms of forced brutality, in the last 5 years. They've had over 80 fatalities, even though the incident has been few. reflecting and indicating that there is more brutality and lethality in Delta.
So are you saying that Delta,
the resources in Delta,
are you saying that Delta has had more incidences than Lagos and Abuja?
No, I am saying Delta has had fewer incidents, but more deaths.
Oh, wow.
So every time there is an incident, there is twice or more deaths as recorded in Lagos and FCT, despite the fact that Delta has a lower population. This means that cult gangs, this means that all of the armed robbery, all of the contesting for oil-rich resources in Delta is what prompts these brutalities, because almost every area like Ugeli, like Warri, they are considered as hostile areas by security agents. So security agents, are always roving this area, looking for these cult gangs, looking for these guys, looking for these, oil merchants, who perform illegal bunkering and all of that. And so this is the reason why they've had more fatalities than any other state in Nigeria in the last 5 years. They don't really have much incident. They've had like 40 incidents, but they have 83 fatalities in the last 5 years. So you should understand that the government, the security forces, the state authorities in Delta need to channel their supposed crackdowns in the right direction, not on indecent dressing, as we've seen. It is also pertinent to mention that Rivers is also the fourth most affected state in Nigeria. Over 30 incidents and over 30 fatalities. This is also largely due to cult gangs. Security agents are always trying to crack down on cult gangs, trying to crack down on illegal oil bunkering, and in this process they tend to inflict unarmed and innocent citizens. And of course, in Imo State, security agents are always trying to crack down on separatist agitations, like IPOP agitations, like ESN agitations, and in this process, they tend to inflict unarmed and defenseless citizens. I will go forward a bit in the next 1 minute to tell you that the most culpable security agent is the Nigerian police, and in the last 5 years, they've had over 300 incidents and over 300 fatalities. And of course, that the police are everywhere. They are the first line of defense for civilians. They are in marketplaces, they are in churches, they are in schools, they are on the roads, and police have more incidents and fatalities in high-dense population states like Lagos, the FCT, and like in Ibadan that we saw last week, where, a police just, for no reason, probably inability to de-escalate, an incident, shot, an unarmed civilian. So the police are major culpables in these incidents and fatalities. After the police, we have the Nigerian army. Yes, the Nigerian army, their incidents and their fatalities, they have more incidents but less fatalities compared to the police. And they, are mostly perpetrating this brutality in the northeast and in the northwest, because they are mostly deployed to conflict zones like Borno, like Kaduna, like Benue, like Plateau, like Adamawa, and like Bauchi. After the Nigerian army, we have the vigilantes. They've also been, perpetrating force brutality in the northeast, the northwest, and the north central. The vigilantes are the second line of defense, such that when the police fail, or when police presence is not adequate, you can always deploy vigilantes to, remote areas, so to speak. But these vigilantes, they tend to lack improper training. They tend to lack adequate training, and they can take laws into their hands. Number 4 are the Nigerian customs. They are found majorly in border areas or border states, like Jibia local government in Katsina, like Ogun State, like Lagos State. And what do these guys do? They shoot at smuggling, vehicles that are supposedly smuggling, contraband arms and all of that. And in this process, they can shoot unarmed and innocent citizens. They even go to warehouses to raid innocent people. So the Nigerian customs is number 4, and last on the list is state task force, like LASMA, like the Kick Against Indiscipline. They tend to take law into their hands. They tend to even act like police. These guys are just there to instill discipline, to ensure that there is law and order in our communities and in our local governments, but they tend to take it too far. And so these 5 actors, the Nigerian police, the Nigerian army, the vigilantes, the state task force, and the Nigerian customs are the 5 major perpetrators of forced brutality in Nigeria. Like I said, there is a major difference between forced brutality and extrajudicial killing. You can always have forced brutality. It may not necessarily lead to the killing of the civilian, but You cannot have an extrajudicial killing without having, a forced brutality.
Now, Kehinde, thanks for your insightful analysis so far and breaking it down across the Federation. Now, this does highlight one problem. There's a serious disconnect between the police services and the civilian population. Is there a downward trend since the last major protest, the End SARS and End Bad Governance, or we're seeing an uptick in this incident? And what does it tell us about the relationship between the police and the civilians, ordinary Nigerians?
Okay, thank you, Benga. Yes, the End SARS protest in 2020, seemed like, it was going to bring an end to police brutality, because we saw a lot of, there were cases in 2020, there were cases in 2021, but in 2022 and in 2023, the cases, the forced brutality incident, if you look at the year-on-year analytical breakdown, in 2023 and in 2024, the cases really simmered a bit, possibly due to government crackdowns, government ensuring that, all of these incidents do not happen, trying to hold police officers accountable, trying to hold the Nigerian army accountable, trying to even punish, some of the culpable security agents. But in 2024 and 2025, we've had a resurgence. We've had, the numbers are spiking. There is virtually no state in Nigeria where there is hardly no an accidental airstrike from the Nigerian Air Force. I think just yesterday or the day before yesterday, a last man officer, was chasing a driver, and that driver, experienced a fatal accident. So in one way or the other, security agents are, they are arming civilians in one way or the other. But I should also state that when this forced brutality happens, when these extrajudicial killings happens, it erodes trust between civilians and security agents, and it will breed more violence. Civilians would resort to vigilantism. Civilians will resort to protecting themselves. There will be reprisal attacks from civilians, and of course, that trust is completely broken. You cannot call on a security agent to protect you, because you know that it's definitely going to extort you, before protecting you, as we've seen in several cases.
Well, I'd like us to go back to the East. In the report there, I don't know if I can get the graphics up on the screen at the moment. I wanted to see Enugu, also number of incidents and fatalities by state. Enugu has, if I'm right, that's 24, 23, 24. And then if you look somewhere at the statistics as well to the right, you also have actors and their fatalities. It seems like the Nigerian army, like you did mention, is also big on the number, 341, 149. And the Nigerian police force, of course, like you said, the biggest culprit here, 317 to 303. While we're talking about the increase in lawless attacks and forced brutality in Nigeria, did you also look at states that have possibly before had an increase in these attacks, but then again, all of a sudden, have come down in terms of the number of attacks as well?
Yes. States like some states in the southeast, like Ebonyi, where it was highly volatile between 2021 and 2023. But like I said, previously, it simmered down possibly due to the reduction in separatist agitations, particularly in the southeast. Every time there is a separatist or a secessionist agitation, you would always see security agents trying to, bring it down, trying to crack down on, all of these agitations. But we've seen a reduction in IPOB, attacks, so to speak, in Ebonyi and in Enugu particularly, and that is responsible for the, low number of incidents that, that is recorded in Enugu and Ebonyi. And for the Nigerian army, like I said, I should quickly come back to that. They have more incidents than the Nigerian police in the last 5 years, even though the difference between them is small. But the Nigerian army has had more incidents because every time they try to, secure an area, or they try to secure maybe an area under curfew, particularly in the northeast or in the northwest, civilians in this area or civilians, particularly in the north, can be extremely hostile to the security agents, and this hostility will definitely lead to the Nigerian army inflicting brutality on them. But the Nigerian army has not had as much fatalities as the Nigerian police.
Okay, I mean, it's interesting here to hear that the Nigerian army hasn't had as much fatalities as the Nigerian police. Maybe not as surprising though. But you've shared these numbers, the ones that the numbers have increased, the states where the numbers have reduced. What do these numbers mean? How can we use these numbers to improve the security situation in our country so that we don't keep hearing about, for example, the states where you say there's an increase in forced brutality? How can these numbers help?
Well, one major reason we are having a spike, amongst other things, is the lack of, a systematized and a structural approach from leadership to tackle the menace of forced brutality. Like I said, every week there is an incident of forced brutality in Nigeria. Every week there is more than 5. If we are working with data, we are working with numbers, but the government has failed to hold anyone accountable. The government has failed to punish any of these. There are literally no consequences for these attacks. The numbers are there. This is a live show. The numbers are everywhere. The numbers are not a hidden resource. But the government is not doing anything to properly, train. Because when these numbers are there, they are indicative of the fact that forced brutality is happening. But what is the government doing to ensure that these numbers, simmer down like we had in 2023 and 2024? And the reason why the numbers simmer down in those 2 years was because of the protests. The protests were extremely high, possibly shaking the nation. So these numbers are indicative of one thing: government is not doing enough to train security agents, especially in de-escalating an incident. Security agents have this tendency to always use violence to terminate violence. They want to use force to terminate violence. How do you shoot a criminal in a dense population? For example, a criminal broke into a dense population like Ojudubega, or a major population like Lagos, and you start shooting. You should know that other unarmed criminals will be caught in the mix. So the inability to de-escalate an incident is reflective of improper training for these guys. We should also mention that security agents are overstretched. They are overstretched because they are combating a mixture, multifaceted insecurity problems. They are combating banditry, they are combating terrorism, they are combating Fulani herdsmen attacks, they are combating cult clashes like we said last weekend, they are combating armed robbery, they are combating a lot of insecurity. Our security agents are overstretched. They don't have proper welfare, they don't have proper training. And if all of these things are not nipped in the bud by the government, these numbers you are seeing, they are just the beginning of more brutality, even as the days goes by.
Now, Kehinde, whose responsibility is it? Is it the Nigerian Police Service Commission? Is it the Inspector General of Police? Is it the federal government? Whose responsibility is it to look at this report and say, this is damning, we can't let this continue. We need to use this as, as a point where we begin to turn a new leaf, where things change for the better. Who can enforce, or who has a political will to make sure we see this changes, and when your report comes out next year, it won't be the same story over and over again?
Well, that's a very, very interesting question, because whether we like it or not, the bulk of security in this country falls on the president. The president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He's not just the president. He's not just a political leader or a political figure. He has the responsibility, the mandate of ensuring that security across all strata, at the community level, at the state level, at the local government level, he has the responsibility of ensuring that security is top drawer, that these numbers go down to the barest minimum. Every single head of security from the community level answers to a boss. The boss answers to another boss. Then the boss answers to the IGP or the chief of defense staff, so to speak. the IGP and the Chief of Defense Staff answers to the President. If these numbers are so alarming, there has not been a report in the last 5 years where 5 major head of security personnel has been sacked, despite all of these numbers, despite all of this force brutality. Now, we are not even talking about insecurity coming from armed groups. We are not talking about Boko Haram and Israel. We are talking about an internal problem here. If you say the president does not have an oversight of the entire country, we have Commissioner of Police, we have the IGP, we have the National Security Advisor. These guys have failed to hold anybody accountable, for force brutality in this Nigeria. So the president needs to start taking actions. He needs to start firing people. There need to be consequences for this action. There need to be consequences for this incident. If you say the Nigerian police has killed over 300 civilians in the last 5 years and nobody has been sacked, not a single officer has been punished, that I know, I might be wrong, has been punished. A police officer shot somebody in Ibadan last week. And, we keep hearing about judicial panel of inquiries. We keep hearing about, reforms that lack poor implementation. So the president, this stops at the back of his table. Of course, the president does not know what is happening in Delta, for example. But there's a commissioner of police in Delta who should crack down on these incidents. And like people would always say, until the relative of a major politician or until the relative of a major security operative is killed, I guess we will not take these whole incidents, we will not take it serious.
Well, again, it's reflective of where our priorities lie. And if we consider the value of the Nigerian life, the importance to reform our forces, just earlier this morning, we were talking about Delta State, and the priorities they are placing on ensuring that they are regulating people dressing as opposed to dealing with the issues of criminality and cultism that the state, has as a challenge. But Kehinde Giwa, thank you very much for sharing the details of this report by SPM Intelligence. They're incredibly helpful. And we hope that the right agencies will take this data and do the needful to ensure that next year we have better reports. Thank you very much for your time with us.